Don't expect the usual introduction that I normally do when I'm making videos for a walkthrough. This level doesn't deserve it. This is the worst level in The Last of Us Remake by far, and I never thought they could do worse than with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was primarily bad because the stealth encounters were atrocious. They were badly paced, they had way too many enemies, and the face validity of the section felt more befitting for a combat situation rather than for a stealth situation. And they were pretty much combat encounters hiding behind the veil of stealth. But in this level, they just throw stealth out the window for a vast majority of the sequences that take place at Tommy's Dam. The game will force you into mandatory combat encounters, and you will just see the gameplay break down greatly. The pacing of the game will be severely compromised. The enemy AI will do weird movements, they'll run all over the place. They'll randomly prioritize you instead of your AI partner or vice versa, and it can lead to a lot of ambiguous moments. Your friendly AI is absolutely useless for a vast majority of the sequences. It's just you on your own. The friendly AI just get in your way. They don't kill the enemies. They miss at ranges where they shouldn't be missing. How is this good? Like, you are opening the game up to all of these holes when you are forcing combat down the player's throat. The Last of Us series isn't built for traditional third-person shooter elements. This is a stealth series that has survival horror elements, and it's built around using guerrilla tactics in order to isolate the enemies one-on-one and to allow you to use your resources intelligently. You try forcing combat down the player's throat, you're going to see just how much the gameplay is going to break down, and how much this goes far outside the norm of your traditional third-person shooter elements. Oh, did you see that just then? Did you see how that guy, as he was running, he was firing his weapon? That's the kind of crap that you witness all the time in these mandatory combat encounters, and I just don't know why Naughty Dog has to shoot themselves in the foot in favor of a model that just clearly shows they don't comprehend their own designs, and they don't understand their own game, and they supposedly remade this game from the ground up. But if you're going to remake a game from the ground up, why don't you fix the issues that were actually apparent in your original version, rather than just bringing them over to the remake, and adding a new slew of issues in the process? I swear to God, guys, the amount of heartache and stress this entire sequence put upon me, with the hours I was spending trying to figure it out, it was really breaking my pride. And my thoughts on this game were pretty much sealed the moment I finished this level. I hate the remake, I really do. The remake is the worst Last of Us game in the entire Last of Us series, and I would rather go and play the remastered version or The Last of Us Part 2 than indulge in this shit and just try to validate Naughty Dog's new ideas as to what defines supposedly good gameplay in the Last of Us game. But that whole entire sequence, you got to do it exactly like how I was doing it. So you got to kill the first two guys that are down below, then go up the stairs, and you need to take out the two enemies up top. It's random whether they choose to prioritize you or not, but most likely they'll prioritize your friendly AI, and when they come out of cover to prioritize the friendly AI, you've got to be very fast because they are very quick to shoot you. And then once you take out the two guys, you need to go on the right staircase and use your shorty to take out the guy that always runs to the right into cover, and then you need to deal with the shotgunner and the guy with the pipe. And that is how it will go. And this part right here, you can use an exploit to skip this, but it is a lot more cumbersome to use in the remake version compared to the remastered version, because in order to use the exploit, you need two Molotovs, and the Molotovs have to be timed at very specific moments. And here's another problem as well with this exploit. If you miss your second Molotov, the enemies, for whatever reason, will be able to shoot you through the geometry. I have countless bloopers of this happening, where I use my first Molotov to kill the first couple of enemies that spawn out of the door, the next spawn triggers, and I'm trying to set up in a position where they won't be able to shoot me, because originally, I was having so much trouble trying to get rid of all the enemies, and so that was why I was trying to go back to a previous position, just to deal with the next couple of enemies, and they would just shoot me through the geometry. How? How is that possible? This feels like some kind of countermeasure system, but how about instead of putting in a shitty countermeasure system, you actually design your scripting on the door better so that the player isn't put in a position where they're able to use the Molotovs on the door? If that's what you're trying to avoid, why don't you design your scripting better, and why don't you design the sequence better so that you're not waiting in the spot, just waiting for the enemies to show themselves and just dragging out the scenario? Like, why do you punish the player for trying to make your game good? Why are you punishing the player for trying to ensure that this sequence doesn't overstay its welcome? They've designed a shitty combat encounter here. And that right there, I killed that Molotov guy, and when I kill that guy, this guy right here normally comes over to this cover spot, and you'll see him in there he is right there. So you can take out that guy. Before I actually take out the Molotov guy, you might have noticed that I jumped down and I dealt with the two guys on the left. As long as you wait and then you jump down, the pattern is always the same. So the first guy will come and set up in a cover position, then you can take him out, but then you gotta wait in the cover a bit, because if you wait long enough, the enemies up top won't be able to shoot you when you get to the next cover position. And you saw me use the axe on that other guy, the second guy. That guy always runs to that spot when you get to that cover spot. It's like he's programmed to do that, but you can use the axe on him, and then from here, you need to systematically deal with the enemies one-on-one. So take out the Molotov guy next, and then take out the guy that sets up in the cover position above. And all you need to do now is just deal with the enemies one-on-one. It's just really engaging gameplay. Like, I never had to put up with this in The Last of Us Remastered. Like, I skipped a shitty combat encounter. This is why I say the exploits were needed in The Last of Us Remastered to make that game good, because you used exploits like that to lessen the magnitude of poor designs and poorly designed encounters. And so it allowed you to get on with the rest of the game and enjoy the game for what it was. But you can't do that here at all. I mean, you can, but like I said before, the timing on your two Molotovs to get rid of the enemies is very specific, and if you even miss your second Molotov, the enemies will be able to hit you through the geometry, they will hit you through cover, they will hit you from across the world, they will hit you through the floor. It is so fucking bullshit. And this part right here is just as annoying as what I did previously, because you have two doorways, right? And they're narrow enough where Tommy, when he goes to shoot at the enemies and he's blocking the doorway, it is so hard to actually get a line on the enemies to actually shoot them. And just like in the remastered version, your friendly AI do absolutely nothing to kill the enemies. They just stand there and do nothing. So why on earth would Naughty Dog try to treat this as if it's some epic combat encounter when your friendly AI does absolutely nothing to help? It's honestly the most vapid combat encounter I've ever seen in the Last of Us series by far. No one is doing anything. You're just waiting, and you can't trigger a last known position because the game forces you to remain in a combat status. And when you are trying to get a bead on the enemies, like when you're trying to shift between doorways, you can't take advantage of the last known position. The enemies know exactly where you are at all times. Like, there's one guy in the room coming up who just remains standing, and he's just locked onto your position, and he will track you through the walls as you are trying to move between doorways. And it's so unfair. And the enemies, all they need is just a split second of seeing your hitbox in order to shoot you. Oh, and that right there, I managed to get 2 El Diablo ammo just then, because if you crouch in that spot and you mash triangle, you will be able to get 2 El Diablo ammo instead of just 1, and you got to do it fast, otherwise you'll miss out on the second ammo drop for the El Diablo. But look at this right here. Do you see any possible way for me to aim from this spot and actually deal with the enemies without being shot? Like, it's almost like the game is forcing you to use your throwable objects, because at least when you use the throwable objects, you can throw the objects around the corner and remain safe. And I feel like that's what they want you to do. And that guy who was very close to me when I was inspecting the right doorway, I could have probably used a Molotov on him, and I did do that a couple of times in my earlier attempts at this. But I figured I would need the Molotovs for the next combat encounter coming up, because the next combat encounter is another shit combat encounter, but I would say it's better than whatever the hell this entire sequence is. But I need to go to the left doorway, because at least the guy on the left, I can easily isolate him and aim from cover and keep the other enemies out of sight, because just like in The Last of Us Remastered and Uncharted 4, the third-person cover trick doesn't work in this game, but I can use the camera to my advantage to put specific enemies on camera so that they're the only enemies who are able to shoot me. So right here, I'm only keeping this guy on camera, and I'm trying to make sure the guy who's standing isn't in camera view. And watch this, by the way. This is the kind of behavior that you are opening the game up when you are forcing the player into mandatory combat encounters. This is why I'm saying this game isn't built for mandatory combat encounters. The enemy AI isn't built for this kind of framework. Why is Naughty Dog trying to favor a framework that doesn't fit the core foundations of the Last of Us series? What the fuck is wrong with them? Like, you never had to put up with this in The Last of Us Remastered because of the fact that you could use exploits to your advantage, and the enemy AI was relatively simple in their programming. But here, it's almost like they want you to view The Last of Us Remake as a fucking joke, and to view themselves as fucking idiots. Just like new Capcom, when they made such a shit show with Resident Evil Village, and pretty much, the Resident Evil Village's development team is the dumbest development team I have ever seen for a Resident Evil game, and this may as well be the dumbest development team ever for The Last of Us series by far. But enough lambasting, let's focus on this sequence right here. So you've got to approach the sequence in a very rigid way. So you have to use a Molotov on the first guy, because if you don't, he's very quick on the draw when he's rushing towards you. Then you need to run over here, use your pistol or your other weapons to take out the Molotov guy when he shows himself, and then come back over here. Thankfully, none of the enemies have Molotovs, so you can remain in cover without any problems. However, the enemies are going to rush you, and this is where the awareness indicators are going to come in handy, because you can track which enemy is coming for you. You cannot trigger a last known position in this entire sequence. The only way to trigger a last known position is to get to the other end of the room. And by the time you get to the other end of the room, you have already killed most of the enemies. So why would they design it this way? Like, this feels like a sequence befitting for the last known position. I mean, look at the amount of rocks everywhere. Look at the number of places you can hide. This feels like a sequence built for stealth, but they force mandatory combat on you once again. And they shoot themselves in the foot when they're exposing all the holes present with the gameplay in The Last of Us Remake. It's almost like with Pittsburgh and with this level, they just had a one-track mind. They had their mind set on something, and therefore it bled into the gameplay, and so you're forced to adhere to a very rigid playstyle in order to lessen the magnitude of these holes. Approaching these sequences in any other fashion will just lead to failure, as I learned in the hours I spent trying to figure out Pittsburgh and this level. Pittsburgh and this level are just lectures. They are lectures on the fundamental failures of the stealth and combat domains when they are pushed to an extrema that the game should not be pushing towards. Pittsburgh is a failure in the stealth domain because the developers decided to favor a model with the stealth that doesnn't fit the face validity of stealth. And instead they just gave us combat encounters hiding behind the veil of stealth. They made their stealth sequences so impractical to approach stealthily, like with the financial district encounter and that nighttime encounter with Henry. And then we have this level, and this level is a lecture on the failures of the combat domain when it is pushed to an extrema that is mandatory combat. And this is what I'm resorting to for this kind of sequence. I'm just isolating the enemies one-on-one and just waiting until they come towards me. I'm approaching the sequence in one specific way with using a Molotov to take out one guy, killing another guy, and then killing the enemies when they come towards me. It's so trash. It really is. And the thing with that sequence is when you kill specific enemies, this actually cues the enemies to start rushing you. Originally, after I killed the Molotov guy, I would kill the sniper, but killing the sniper was putting me in an unfavorable position, and that is why I opted to instead go back to the truck and deal with the guy on the left so that the enemies that were rushing me were the ones I needed. And now we have this stealth encounter. This stealth encounter isn't so bad. This is the one good part to Tommy's Dam. Like, this is traditional Last of Us gameplay. Why they couldn't use this as the reference model when designing Tommy's Dam, I don't know. But taking care of these two enemies is easy. They go off on the same paths. And now we have these guys who will only spawn in when you get to this part of the stairs right here. And I'm going to use my bow and arrow on one of these enemies. And I'm going to use it on the guy on the right. But maybe that wasn't the best choice because the guy on the right is pretty easy to isolate. The other two enemies, not so much. And I get some weird behaviors here because one of the two enemies on the left, he remains still for an extended duration for some reason. And when I kill the other of the two enemies, he starts to move again, and you're going to see it in a moment. But I did notice this behavior as well in The Last of Us Part 2. I noticed this in the hospital infiltration encounter, and I was playing The Last of Us Part 2 yesterday, and I came across this behavior. It was only in that sequence. But one of the three enemies right near the exit for the stealth encounter, she was just standing still for an extended duration and she was not moving. So it seems like this is some kind of inherited system from The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know what it is, but that guy right there, do you see him do the corner search animation on that couch? Now he's just going to stand there. Why is he standing still? Why is this happening? And it's only when I kill the next enemy that he resumes his pathing. This is very unusual behavior. I've never seen this before up until now. I'm wondering if this is something exclusive to the PS5 versions of The Last of Us Part 2 and this game in particular. That's what I'm wondering. But I take out this guy, and this is when this guy is going to move as soon as I strangle this guy. And once he's dead, this will be the end of the sequence. But all I'll say, guys, is Last of Us Part 2 is a way better game than this. I was playing it yesterday, like I already mentioned, and the stealth scenarios, the combat encounters, they felt a lot more fun than what I had to go through trying to figure out this whole entire level, as well as Pittsburgh. Getting screwed by the holes present with this game, getting screwed by the poor balancing, getting screwed by additional factors like that. It was really aggravating and it was heartbreaking to say the least. But that's the end of that. And now for some bloopers. So these first set of bloopers have me getting shot through the cover when I'm trying to use the Molotovs to skip this atrociously designed, improperly paced combat encounter. And every time I miss the second Molotov, and I miss the next couple of enemies that spawn in, they're going to be able to magically shoot me through the geometry. How is this possible? And as you can see, even when I'm running away, trying to keep some distance between these guys, they are going to be able to still shoot me. Like, watch this. Watch this. I'm going to be able to get shot from here. How? How is that possible? And right here, I get shot at an angle that shouldn't be possible for an enemy to shoot me from. And then here is another example of the shotgunner shooting me at an angle he should not be able to hit me at. And he was far away, and that shouldn't have killed me. And right there, even though my reticle was perfectly on the guy, he's somehow still alive. And right there, that guy somehow survived a kill shot. There was even a red hit marker, and he's somehow alive. That guy managed to fire a sniper rifle while he was flinching, and then right here, Tommy interrupts my stun on this guy. That is a great example of the friendly AI getting in your way like they always do in this game. But that is the end of this badly designed level. I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. I cannot believe Naughty Dog playtested this entire level and thought it was serviceable for the game when it goes against the very core foundations of The Last of Us's gameplay. How? How can they misunderstand their own game? They have 3 games in the series. It's not like they're gonna get lost in some slew of content like you would in like Assassin's Creed, for instance. But 3 games, and they somehow shoot themselves in the foot to create these situations that aren't befitting for the core foundation of gameplay in The Last of Us Remake? How the hell is that possible? That's like new Capcom levels of stupidity. That's all I'm going to say about that. Stay tuned for the next couple of chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.